Good morning. It is October 10th. We welcome Stanley McCracken to our virtual Macomb Lakeside Wise Aging. Let me tell you a little bit about him. He is a PhD, LCSW, I knew that was social work, RDDP, which is Registered Dual Disorder Professional. He's a lecturer at the University of Chicago Crown Family School of Social Work, Policy and Practice. McCracken has 30 years of experience as a clinician, educator, and consultant specializing primarily in mental health, chemical dependence, and dual disorders. He has extensive experience in teaching motivational interviewing and integrating spirituality in clinical practice. He is a licensed clinical social worker, I knew it was social worker, LCSW, and registered for dual disorder placement. And with that, we welcome Stanley McCracken. We can't wait to hear what you have to share with us.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. I just realized that I think I sent you something that's a number of years old, because it said 30 years. Actually, it's well over 40 years experience. And then I retired in 2019, right before COVID hit. So that was kind of fortunate timing, though I still do teach one course virtually. I teach my spirituality and social work practice course. And thankfully, supposedly this spring, we'll be able to do it live again, because that's kind of my more natural setting for what I do. Today, I'll be talking about, okay, here we go. Try to find out. By the way, I don't have any grandchildren. And so there may be some glitches and stuff. I need, I should probably tell you, I almost became the president, because during the last election, I had an idea. If I were elected president, my first executive action would be that when anybody turns 60 years old, they're assigned a 6-year-old child to help them with any digital doodads. And, I think the other part of that was the first time you ask the child for assistance and that child rolls his or her eyes, then you get to trade them off for a new 6-year-old. I figured I pretty much had the over 50 vote locked. So I could be sitting in the White House.
I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
When I tried to get everyone on Zoom last year, if nothing else failed, I say, do you have a grandchild?
Always works.
Yeah.
Always works. Yeah. And it doesn't matter. Anytime they're like old enough to sit upright in the chair, they can probably do better than I can on this. So today I'm going to talk a little, ask the question, what is wisdom? And I would tell you, first of all, I'm not an authority in this area. I'm someone who's been interested in this for a long time, ever since, oddly enough, I was about 5. And my father pointed out one of the women in the church that we went to, and he said, she's very wise. And so, even as a 5-year-old, I'd heard stories about Solomon choosing wisdom over riches and that, and I'd heard all the stories and everything. And I don't have any memory of how my father explained what wisdom was to a 5-year-old, but I used to try to watch this woman to see if I could catch her doing something wise, and so I've been interested in this for a long time. I have to say, I'm not sure I know much more about it than I did when I was 5, but it is an interesting topic. So what is wisdom? And here we've got some pictures. I'm guessing some of you may recognize Rabbi Heschel and Maya Angelou. And this is Emerson. And Emerson is about as close to a saint as Unitarians have. So we kind of don't want to get overshadowed by other folks. So that's our Saint Ralph, which I think is a good name for a saint, Saint Ralph. So let me ask you, what is wisdom? what do you mean when you say a person's wise? And just raise your hand and say something. I'd be curious. Oh, by the way, I should tell you, I was a sergeant in the Army, and not having volunteers doesn't actually slow me down. So, what is wisdom?
I'm sure somebody has, all right, Amy, I see you unmuted. Go,
Oh
okay.
my goodness. I was just thinking about it. To me, it's just a deep sense of knowing, a universal, just a global understanding of what is.
Okay, I like that. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else?
The Simons, and you need to unmute. No, now you took your camera off. All right. Well, oh,
Sorry.
there they are.
Sorry about that. Part of wisdom is knowing when to keep your mouth shut.
Yes, that was one of the hardest lessons I have had to learn. Still working on it. Yes, Floyd.
You need to unmute.
I'll take a crack. Wisdom is looking at a situation and perceiving a truth that a lot of other people are missing.
Wow, I like that a lot. Thank you. Thank you. Could I have one more, please? Yes, Randall.
Wisdom is actually being an active listener and hearing from all sides and not
Good.
just thinking you have the right answer.
Good. And it's interesting that how yours and Simon's came together, right? Knowing when to keep your mouth shut, listen first, then talk. Okay, thank you. Okay, share screen again here. Okay. Now let me go to the next one. So what is the meaning of life? Come on here now. Have you tried Googling it? But by the way, at the end of this, I asked Alexa this morning, Alexa, what is wisdom? And I was kind of impressed with the answer. In fact, I was just going to play her answer and then just say, okay, that's it, goodbye. But I'm having way too much fun, so I'm not going to do that. Okay. But I will share that at the end. First of all, there isn't any universally accepted definition. Webster says characteristics attributed to a wise person, ability to discern inner qualities in relationships, and that goes along with discerning the truth. Okay. Accumulated philosophical or scientific learning, and the teaching of ancient wise, and initially it said ancient wise men. I have to tell you, when I think of the wise people I've known, almost all of them have been women. I don't know what that means, but I had to change it. And you probably recognize these two guys here. If you haven't watched The Joy, you should. Desmond Tutu and Dalai Lama, those two old guys, they refer to each other as their older and mischievous brother. So those are, I always love to hear those two people together. Folk beliefs characterize wisdom as an essence, a set of immutable characteristics developing as a consequence of innate potential and extraordinary life experiences. And that's one of the things that I will be coming back to again about the life experiences. Emphasis is on the process rather than the outcome of decision making. And I thought it was I like the way that they did this. And excuse me, implicit theories are representations of what lay people view wisdom to be. Explicit theories are those constructed and tested by experts who study wisdom, psychologists, philosophers, sociologists. And implicit theories can be used to test explicit theories. A theory of wisdom totally inconsistent with lay views would be hard to define. I like that a lot. if the people that are the professional wisdom people come up with something that doesn't make sense to the lay definitions, then that I think would be a hard thing to defend. Now, deals with universal truths, not with the appearance of fleeting phenomena. So again, we're coming back to what's the underlying truth in that, and those tend to be more universal, with a couple caveats that I'll come to in a minute. It isn't specialized, but attempts to understand how various aspects of reality are related. And there is now in the wisdom literature, and by wisdom literature here, I mean the research literature, not the wisdom literature from the Bible, but isn't specialized, but understands how various aspects of reality are related. Studies of wisdom identify several clusters of characteristics, and notice how these clusters overlap with what you told me. Intellectual humility, recognition of uncertainty and change, considers different perspectives and integrate these perspectives. There is a second cluster, cognitive, includes cognitive, affective, particularly compassion, reflective domains, self-transcendence, and by reflective, self-reflection is an important part of a lot of these current studies. Humor, a sense of humor, cognitive ability, insight, an attitude of self-reflection, concern for others, real-world skills, and spirituality. So these are some of the clusters that tend to appear repeatedly in research. And by the way, one of the things about this field, which is probably not a surprise to you, is a lot of the research is cross-cultural. So one of the people I'll be referring to several times, his name is Dilip Jesty. And Dilip Jesty is a psychiatrist in San Diego. And initially his field was studying schizophrenia. Then he moved and spent a lot of time on studying older adults, and is one of the top people in gerontology. And now, which I thought was an interesting segue, he's now spent a lot of time studying wisdom. He has a paper comparing philosophy, Western concepts of wisdom with the wisdom in the Bhagavad Gita, which is a fascinating read. And by the way, you have my, Vanessa, do you normally hand out or give handouts or make those available?
I'm definitely going to make it available because we're not in person. So I think that, and I don't think I can put it in the chat, but we can say at the end, if people email me, I will be happy to forward what you gave to me.
Perfect. And my email address is on there. So if I talk about something and you'd like a copy of the paper, I would be happy to forward that to you. Also, there are some links that I think you'll be interested in, and as well as I have a couple pages or several slides with references on it that I think you'd be interested in.
Yeah, we also had a quick quote in the chat from Evie Horowitz, a friend who was a retired English professor at Bar Ilan, which is in Beersheba University in Israel, has a wonderful quote about the difference between wisdom and knowledge. She wishes she could find the whole thing and the author, as she was quite taken by it. But I think it's important enough to mention.
Okay, I'll have a couple slides on that, and I'll be interested in seeing whether those overlap and the degree to which they do. And if you would be willing, I would love to hear that, to get a reference for that quote. The beginning of awe is wonder, and the beginning of wisdom is awe. And this is from Rabbi Heschel. And by the way, for Ashley's mom, she, not surprisingly, Amy, Ashley has turned me on to Rabbi Heschel, so I've been reading from him every day. So I hope she's getting a kickback for sale of his books. So I would think that would be only reasonable. So this is, speaking of knowledge, this is from the field of artificial intelligence. There's a hierarchy of, they look at a hierarchy of data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. And data, these are the measurements and symbols. So this is the raw information that comes in, or what's used to make information. Information, application of data to answer a question. Knowledge depends on the context of the question and answer, and wisdom depends on values. So under some circumstances, a wise person may choose a socially conscious, reasonable option rather than a preference maximizing rational option. So that this series here is what comes from artificial wisdom. And by the way, one of the areas where there's a lot of interest now in the wisdom study field is, can you make artificially wise? So could we have a system that isn't just smart, but is actually wise? And Dilip Jesti actually and some others have written some papers on this, is what would you have to do? Could it be possible to make a wise system? Which I thought is interesting. So Jesti and colleagues asked 21 men and women ages 58 to 97 receiving hospice care for a terminal illness how they defined wisdom. All of the recognized major themes were contained in their description. What is this here? Oh, okay. Pro-social attitudes, knowledge of life, being active, emotional regulation, positivity and gratitude, openness to new experience, acknowledgement of uncertainty, spirituality and religion, self-reflection, sense of humor, and tolerance. And I thought I was quite impressed. Similarly, all of the participants cited decision-making and knowledge of life as essential to wisdom, which I thought this was, number one, I thought it was a very interesting sample to ask these questions of the people. What, as you were nearing the end of life, what you thought of wisdom? So here are the wise reasoning as a model from Igor Grossman. Igor Grossman, and Vanessa, I think I sent you a link. There is a wisdom summit tomorrow. And it starts, unfortunately, it starts at 7 o'clock Central Time, AM, by the way.
Oh.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, and it goes all day. So Igor Grossman is one of the scholars in this area. He's from Waterloo, I believe it's Waterloo University. And this is his model. So the components: recognizing uncertainty and change, intellectual humility, integrating differences and different perspectives, seeking others' perspectives. So that wise reasoning, he would argue, is a combination or an integration of all of these components. Okay. And as we've already heard, wise people are not always silent, but they know when to be. Okay. And this is one of the things that spouses learn early on, and sometimes some of my greatest moments were when I took advantage of the opportunity to keep my mouth shut. I wish it happened more often. So how would you rate yourself? And these items are from, for each item, rate strongly disagree, neutral, agree, and strongly agree. Now, if you're interested in taking and scoring the SD WISE, that's the instrument. It stands for San Diego, and I can't remember what the WISE acronym is. I have a good memory. It's just short. In fact, it really bothers me. I used to remember stuff that hadn't even happened. Now I have a hard time remembering where I parked my car, and it's in the garage, I think. Well, anyway, But these are items from that, and I'm gonna go through each of these and think about how you would answer these. I'm good at perceiving how others are feeling. Others look to me to help them make decisions. Now, that's one of the characteristics they found, is that wise people often, others around them know they are and go to them for advice. Others say I give good advice. I often don't know what to tell people when they come to me for advice. I have trouble making decisions. I usually make decisions in a timely fashion. I tend to postpone making major decisions as long as I can. I would rather someone else make the decision for me if I'm uncertain. In fact, I thought that was why people got married, is that you could have you ask your spouse to do that. I have trouble thinking clearly when I'm upset. I remain calm under pressure. I'm able to recover well from emotional distress or stress. I cannot filter my negative emotions. I take time to reflect on my thoughts. I avoid self-reflection. And you probably find it's interesting that one of the things that often comes up in the wisdom literature is understanding that two opposites can both be true, which I thought is reflected in the way that they've put together this instrument. It's important that I understand the reason for my action.
Oh my
I
God.
don't analyze my own behavior. I have a difficult time keeping friendships. I avoid situations where I know my help will be needed. I would stop a stranger who dropped a $20 bill to return it.
Never.
Yeah, if I could catch them. I treat others the way I would like to be treated. I enjoy learning things about other cultures. I'm okay with others having morals and values other than my own. I generally learn something from every person I meet. I enjoy being exposed to diverse viewpoints. Okay, so what do you think of those items? Any thoughts about what those items are? Are they missing, in your mind, are they missing anything there? Is there something that you kept, is there a question you kept waiting for but never came?
Well, my spouse was talking about wisdom as he was listening to you and said something about experience. And maybe, can we learn from our experiences would be someone who is wise.
Yes, right. That's right. It's one thing to reinvent the wheel. The problem is reinventing a square wheel, right? Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? Anything that either struck you about a question or a question that you thought they should have asked? And I like the idea of the experience. Yes, Mr. Joyce?
Yes,
Joyce and then Floyd.
I agree with all of the attributes that you mentioned, but the one that I have lived by, a little saying that helps me along the way, is patience and a sense of humor. And you haven't mentioned the word patience, because patience is very important when you're dealing in making judgments and with others.
Oh, amen to that. Yes. This is one of the things that I teach in the School of Social Work, and most of what I teach are clinical skills. And the first thing is, don't start talking until you've listened. Be patient, because that story needs to come out. But thank you. I think that's a very important one.
Floyd?
Yeah, of all the questions, my thought going through my mind was that a wise person would agree or strongly agree with a lot of them, but there were 3 or 4 where a wise person absolutely had to disagree, or in my opinion, that person isn't wise.
Okay, good. Thank you. Randall?
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I know it's part of the 10 command, commandments, treat others as you would have, as you would be treated. But in this light,
That's not it's in Torah, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. The 10 commandments are 10, specific things, but it's definitely.
golden, I know, yeah, I'm sorry, I just misspoke.
It's okay, it's okay.
Thank you for that clarification.
All right.
The golden rule. It's treat others as you would want to be treated. In this light of diversity, and I think if you're a wise person, I think that should be different. I think you would treat others as they would like to be treated, because you're recognizing the differences among us, and that will help for inclusion, especially in this day and age of diversity and inclusion. So that, and thank you for that. Yeah.
A version of that I heard was treat others as you would like to be treated if you were them. But yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Thank you. Anybody else? Anything strike you about those?
Susan?
Yeah, I think that it's very important to have empathy and to try to understand where other people are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
I've always thought that even though we think we understand other people, when the doors close at night to their house, you never know what's going on inside.
Oh, that, yeah. I
So
like
that you should have some empathy for whatever other people are going through.
Thank you. And thank you in particular, Susan, because one of the areas, and okay, now we're moving toward politics, and many of my students would say, okay, we've made it 30 minutes without that. So this is actually a personal best for me. One of the areas, groups that I'm having a hard time with compassion for are the really avid Trump supporters. And I think that what you said may help me with that, is we don't know what is going on when those doors are closed. So thank you. I appreciate it. Anyone else? One more. Oh, Evie.
Yeah, Evie.
Evie.
And you need to unmute.
A quote that I recently heard at a personal leadership conference was, "What do I not know?" Which I think leads to that.
Yeah, I like that. And yeah, knowing that, and I believe this is one of the sayings of Confucius: a wise person knows what he doesn't know, and a foolish person knows not what he knows not. So yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm going to share screen again. Okay, and come on. I wonder if there's a way to.
There you go. And then if you go to, I think, view.
Well, unfortunately, the bar that's up there, may move it over. Oh, here we go. I got it moved now. That's it. Perfect. Come on. There we go. A wise man once said, I don't know, ask a woman. So what's not wisdom? Okay. And here's some things that were listed as not wisdom. Quasi-wisdom, which is near wisdom, incomplete reflection or insight, a veneer of wisdom, false appearance of wisdom, often because of a position of power or authority. This is one of the things I learned when I was doing clinical practice, and actually as a teacher too, is that once you have white hair, then you can say the most outrageous things and people will believe it. So I think that may fall under this veneer of wisdom. Pseudo-wisdom, false appearance of wisdom motivated by self-interest. Dark pseudo-wisdom, false appearance of wisdom motivated by evil intentions. So, what do you think? Would you identify these same dimensions as the same non-wisdom dimensions? Quasi-wisdom, veneer, pseudo, and dark wisdom. What do you think?
I mean, I agree with all of those. I mean, maybe things are missing, but I'm sure we can all think of examples of everything you mentioned.
Yeah,
It's the Brotman Simons, but go ahead.
Oh, it just seems in order to have true wisdom, you have to have an altruistic viewpoint. It can't just be how you benefit or others in your circle may benefit. You have to have the greater interest, the greater good.
that's an interesting comment because that's some of the more current writings is talking about they talk for the good of humanity. That altruism is one that's coming up a lot now. William.
Bill Rosen, and you need to unmute. If I had a dime for every time I said that. If I had a nickel for every time I said that. Bill, you're still muted. Bill.
I was just thinking about the false sense of wisdom. Think about the Wizard of Oz. Remember, he's up there. Everybody believes in the Wizard of Oz. He's all wise. He knows all. And you get up there, you pull the curtain. Oh my God. Anyway, that was my point.
That one of the books that I have referenced in the references at the end of this is the Cambridge Handbook of Wisdom. There's a chapter in there that I think you would very much enjoy. And the title of the chapter is Why People Often Prefer Wise Guys to Guys Who Are Wise. And the author goes through, has some theories, of course, they talk about, but they use as examples a number of different leaders, including people like Stalin and Hitler and Mugabe, and in fact, Donald Trump, and talks about why it is that how is it that people like that are successful? How do they get people to follow them? And he goes through a series of steps, and it's just fascinating. I've recommended this about 50 times. I wish I could figure out a way to copy that chapter from Kindle. I may try, and if I can do it, sometimes the author is Sternberg, and a lot of times he will make available PDFs of some of his chapters. If I can find that, I'll send that to you, Vanessa, so that people can read it, because it makes very interesting reading.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. And of course, if we try to do everything, so that the author gets the proper credit.
Yeah, amen. Any others? Your reactions to the false wisdom or to the appearance of wisdom? Yes, Evie.
You need to unmute.
I owe you a dime. I think that wise guys shout, and I think of wise guys. I think I shout, and I think wise people whisper.
Oh, that's interesting. I like that. I'm glad you're recording this. Howard.
Could we consider that maybe we're just creating a new status called wisdom, and that we would like to aspire to something, and that we've now created another grade to go to, another classification to almost narcissistically put onto ourselves, so that when we talk about the Hitlers and Trump and all these other people, are we not more or less aggrandizing our own points of view, as opposed to just simply acquiring something that objectively we can't really score? We aspire.
That's a great point.
For it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Is there a sense of smugness in there? Yeah.
Is there a sense? Well, smart is a lot of different things, but we're trying to create a category that seems to be neither definable, although we attribute qualities to it, but are we aspiring to something that gives us a higher or a better position in some kind of a social social structure or standing. I mean, we revere wisdom, it seems, across many different cultures and many different religions, but at the end, who is the wise is determined by who determines agrees with them.
Good, interesting, good. I need to give that some more thought. Again, I'm glad this is being recorded. Jeff and then Marilyn.
Okay, yeah, I mean, at the beginning, it seems to me that wisdom is good. It's not just understanding people and how to interpret their actions and relate to them, but wisdom, unlike knowledge, is just good. And it sort of relates to this immediately previous comment is, if you feel like no Trump supporter can be wise, does that mean you cannot be wise? You know what I'm trying to say? Because you're sort of, from my point of view, yeah, I know some Trump supporters and I think they're crazy. So does that rob me of the ability to be wise? Because I'm making these assumptions about people I think are terrible.
Yeah. Well, and I have to say that I'm guessing all of us in here have friends who are Trump supporters that we actually would say, there is some wisdom there. And I wish I could understand more clearly what they find in him to support. And that's a conversation that, unfortunately, I need to have more with people. Thank you for that. Marilyn, you're next.
Yeah, I just want to clear, I don't feel that way. I don't think there's something wise about it.
Well, I don't know everybody, but I do know some people that I thought, they've made good decisions. They've shown that there's some wisdom there in the past, and I'm guessing it's for a good reason. I just they have a hard time explaining it to me, I think, and maybe it's because of my closed mind. Marilyn?
And you need to unmute.
Thank you. I think that we need to understand that wisdom is a lifelong lesson. We never know enough. We'll never see enough. We'll never be able to do enough. We'll never hear enough. We'll never learn enough. How finite we are, how short our lives are, what a miracle our lives are. And who is all wise? God is all wise. We know a lot of smart people who understand and can convey what they've learned or what they've read, but we are just human beings and we'll never be all wise. Only God will be all wise.
Yes. Where were you when I created the world?
Probably sleeping.
Thank you, Neil, and then I'll move on.
I don't think even his supporters would consider Donald Trump to be wise. They might consider him to be practical, successful, intelligent, but much more dangerous, I think, is somebody that they do consider to be wise, and that would be Tucker Carlson. And it bothers me. Here's a man that I feel is up to no good, that people do consider him to be wise. And just to add a perspective you might not have, as a Jew, as a paranoid Jew, when we hear of Tucker Carlson, we think it's only a matter of time before he accuses us of poisoning the well.
Yeah, yeah, I've had some of those same fears. Is what's next? The what's next worry. Yeah, thank you. Okay, continue here and share and do this. Oops. Okay, now the opposite of wisdom is not non-wisdom, but foolishness. So foolishness is exhibited through 6 cognitive fallacies. 1, unrealistic optimism. People who think they are so smart and effective they can do whatever they want. Egocentrism, when people start to think they are the only ones who matter. omniscience. People think they know everything and lose sight of the limitations of their own knowledge. And there's, for those of you who are fans of Larry the Cable Guy, he says, you can't fix stupid. Actually, I'm not sure I agree with that, but what you can't fix is ignorance and arrogance. That combination is pretty much, yeah, I don't know what you, if you can fix it, I don't know how. And in a lot of our most famous and most horrific military failures have been because of that combination. You may probably will remember that during the Tet Offensive in 1968, the senior generals, the ones that were in charge of the whole show, when they got reports back from their junior officers in the field, they thought the junior officers were being hysterical. Because there's no way that a group of ragtag Viet Cong could move that kind of equipment across the mountains and do the kinds of things that they said, because, and they just knew, we're absolutely sure. Well, guess what? It turns out that they moved them piece at a time and carried them by hand, so that combination of ignorance and arrogance is lethal. Omnipotence, people think they're all powerful and can do whatever they want. Invulnerability, people think they can get away with anything, that they're too clever to be caught, or it won't matter. Ethical disengagement, people think that ethics are unimportant, or important, excuse me, important, but only for others. These are people who are above ethical concerns. Your rules just don't apply to superior people like me. So that was, this is the opposite of wisdom. So if you're paying $3 for a bottle of smart water, it isn't working. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about foolishness. Yes, James.
I've been thinking about this actually all along. I mean, when it started with what is wisdom, and I think it underlies a lot of what people have said, from the knowing when to listen and not talk to why Trump and a lot of other things. And it strikes me that the thing that distinguishes wisdom to a degree isn't just what you know. The knowledge is a piece of it, but it's what you do with it. And I think that's a big piece of your foolishness definitions and the non-wisdoms and all of that.
Okay, so it's not just what's going on in here, but it's the actions. It's how you live it.
Yeah, what to do with it once it's moved through here.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anyone else? What do you think of these, the foolishnesses? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on. Okay, and here we go. Okay, so who's someone you consider wise? Who's your model for wisdom? What were they like? How did you feel in their presence? What did you take away from your encounter with this person? What did they do? And this goes to James's question. What did they do that led you to name them as wise? And how was this wisdom communicated? And let's just do this. Who's someone you consider wise? Do you have a model for wisdom? What were they like? How did you feel in their presence? What did you take away? And what did they do that led you to name them as wise? And how was this communicated?
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't, my mom is on the call today, but I think, a lot of your wisdom comes from your parents. And you go through a time in life where you think they don't know anything. And then all of a sudden you get older and you're like, wow, they know so much.
They really learned a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And so, certainly for me, and I would imagine for a lot of people, that wisdom comes from the other generation.
Yeah, yeah. I think
It's
Simons.
right, this Brotman Simons and then Amy.
Thank you.
Hello again. What's interesting for me in the last several years is that our opinions of people can also change over time as to whether we think they show elements of wisdom or not. For me, and probably for others, a classic case has been George W. Bush. I actually thought he was a blithering idiot, and as president, a horrible president. But he's been a very good non-president,
Yes.
ex-president, shown in public comments in the last several years. Maybe just looks good compared to the other guy, but he's shown a lot of comments that really show wisdom, in my opinion. Maybe that's based on his experiences and knowing what to say and not to say as an ex-president.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I've had that same experience. Yeah, Amy.
So it's an interesting question because as you've been talking all along, I was wondering, is wisdom something that you can teach children? Is wisdom something that is in our DNA? Are there some people raised in the same family who just don't acquire the wisdom that other siblings do? So then when you presented the question and I was thinking about it, I thought about my parents, both of them, and how they taught really strong values of empathy, compassion, being kind, taking care of others, putting, having this global sense of a conscience. If I would do something wrong, what do you think about it? What is the difference between right and wrong? So I feel that was my upbringing. So that was what came to me. So maybe I answered my own question that yes, you can teach wisdom. I don't know. It was just a question that I had.
Well, what you have done is to identify one of the biggest issues in this field now is, can it be taught and how do you do it? And there's just been a flood of papers coming out with that. And how do you set up a school system to teach that? Not only just can it be taught, how do you do it, but can you do it when you bring it to scale? Floyd, I think I saw your hand.
Yes, my hand was up.
Right.
Who is?
Floyd, go ahead.
Floyd, oh, okay.
Okay. One question asked was, is someone wise in all situations? And I think that's absolutely not true. A person can be wise and sometimes and unwise other times. And the other question was, what do you perceive as someone who's wise? What makes you think someone is wise? And my answer is, if someone sees an insight into a situation or a relationship that you haven't seen yourself or heard of yourself, it's a new perspective. That's a person who, at least on that issue, I think is very wise.
Thank you. Anyone else? Do you have a model for wisdom?
Marilyn. And while she's unmuting, I think that with wisdom and ethics, this is a place where when we send our kids to Love Learning, our religious school, this is where we can shine. This is where we, Jewish camp, any type of, those Jewish extra things, and also with other faiths and something that we can take pride in. So Marilyn, yeah.
It may interest you to know that some of the approaches to teaching wisdom have focused on ethics, which I thought was interesting. Marilyn, I think that
you're ready to go.
I often think about, I'm very blessed. I have many family members, as most of us do, that we can learn from if we have to open up our eyes and ears. I always tell the kids, put up your antennas, don't pass by this opportunity. You have to be open to it and you have to be alert. You can be near the wisest person and just not even be turned on enough to realize it. But I was thinking, and I always do when I think, well, what would I do in this situation? Because I lost my parents, my mother very young, and my father, and I really, I have an uncle, and it just happens to be what we call his yahrzeit this weekend, Abe Shanes. And he was gifted with such intelligence. He was probably a genius, literally. and was not haughty in any way because of his innate gifts. But I really want to honor his memory today by telling you that he's probably the most, he and my aunt in combination were probably the people that when I didn't have a mother, where I went when I needed words of wisdom to help me through certain situations that would come up in my life that I needed to, and I knew that their guidance would be something that I probably would want to follow their advice, did follow their advice. They trickled down not just to me, but they became grandparents to my children. And they didn't just take responsibility, and it's something we all are responsible, not just for our immediate families, but to reach out to the world, which McComb does so beautifully with our social action. And he passed the bar. He had to get permission because he was so young. And he did that because he didn't have a father, and he needed to take care of his mother and his sister. So he had this inclination at a very young age to do the right thing, to deliver newspapers, to get permission to pass the bar at, I think, like 19 or 20. He was the very first, the youngest to ever pass the bar. And he practiced until a ripe old age. And he would have us sit around the table for a meal once a week. And he exuded such dignity. And he was so knowledgeable about almost anything. And he would talk about all of this to the children. And we would hear firsthand what he was thinking, what values, what was happening in the world. And everybody participated around that table. And he comes to mind, not just for me, but for my children. And he was life-changing to me. He had a very strong religious sense of spirituality and right and wrong. He was president of his congregation. He, when he was very devoted to Israel, he made many, many trips, supported it. You could just watch what he was doing.
Sounds like he was someone in all aspects of his life who lived it.
He lived it. And
Thank you.
You couldn't help but learn, and you couldn't help but want to be like him as a role model and pass that on from generation to generation.
Marilyn, thanks so much. I know Julie and Bill, you have your hands up. Julie, go ahead.
We'll move on. Yeah, thank you.
Hi. Yeah, when I think of people that are wise as role models to me, the ones that actually come to mind are a particular rabbi, a particular doctor, and one of my grandmothers. And what's unique about all of them are they were people that had seen a tremendous amount in their lives. So real breadth of vision and view, but were very limited in their words. So that you kind of hung on what they said. They tend to be people who do a lot more listening than talking, and synthesize and are really effective communicators, and also have a way of simplifying the complex and the chaos into just a few simple ways of living. So
seeing the essence of something.
Distilling. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you. Bill.
Blocks to being a wise person is the ability to think holistically. And when I observe people who, when we're dealing with a particular matter that has to be resolved, they have an innate ability to examine all of the issues involved. And my goodness, in making their point, they can rule out certain issues that aren't important, but are important, and be able to really synthesize everything to a single thing. And I look at a person like that and say, my goodness, that person is wise.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so I'll share this. Okay, so were they wise in all situations? Are people wise in all situations? We've already had, yeah, not necessarily. Solomon's paradox is one that you run into in this literature. Biblical King Solomon, portrayed as a paragon of wisdom. People traveled from far away to seek his counsel, and yet he maintained over 800 wives and concubines. His passions distracted him from educating his son, who grew up to be an ineffective tyrant, and he bragged of his wealth. And now, in showing our wisdom here, none of the men will say anything about having 800 wives. Okay, this is one of those opportunities to keep our mouth shut that we will take advantage of. But this is one of the things is that, you know, it turns out one of the things that repeats in the literature is that people make better, more wise decisions if it's about somebody else than about themselves. So one of the ways they test this is they give people vignettes and ask them to think through. And some of the vignettes, it's like, it's my brother. And some of the vignettes, it's a friend's brother came. And it turns out that people almost very consistently make better decisions about other people than about themselves. And so they have what's sometimes referred to as general wisdom versus personal wisdom. This is King Solomon's poster. The numbers are just too fuzzy. Plus, there's the risk of appearing anti-family. Whatever you do, I say stall for more time. Just a thought. By the way, I have like 180 religious cartoons. Okay, so wisdom is highly variable across situations, seems to be context, situation, and culture dependent. It's easier to be wise with others than self. Western traditions, and this is probably not going to be a great surprise to anyone, tend to be more analytic, take a more analytical approach. Eastern traditions focus on both analytical and synthetic approaches. Analytic approach relies on knowledge and information processing capabilities, prioritizing cognitive abilities and goal attainment. Synthetic approach highlights human experience and ways that one can integrate past and present and view a situation as both a whole and its constituent parts. Okay, and one of the other things is that there seems to be differences between cultures that are more individualistic versus collective in how people approach things. I wish a bright star would appear in the east over Washington, D.C. We could use a few wise men up there. So, what kind of experiences lead to wisdom? Can it be taught? What kind of experience? And does it automatically come with growing older? You know, like they say, too soon old, too late smart. So, to date, as far as I know, no proposed program for training has been validated empirically. Here's some of the things that have been tried. Most of the research is on teaching virtuous behavior, arguably linked to an ability to make wise decisions, working through ethical decision-making vignettes, teaching inferential reasoning about everyday decisions, and then studying exemplars of wisdom, morals, and values. Now, part of the studying of the exemplars is also studying the context, both historical and cultural context in which they offered. So these are some of the things that have been tried. And there have been, of course, since 2017, there have been a number of other things tried too. Good judgment comes from experience, and a lot of that comes from bad judgment. I always love Will Rogers. So, overall, teaching wise thinking through exemplars can be guided through a combination of educational tasks concerning socio-historical context, life narratives, and by affective reflection on their lives. The defining feature of wisdom fostering situations is the degree to which it challenges one's basic beliefs about life, which may be why some of the traumatic experiences that people have, people learn from. The ones that shake your worldview, the ones that challenge your worldview. So, post-traumatic growth is the experience of positive change that occurs as a result of struggle with highly challenging life crises, manifested by increased appreciation for life, more meaningful personal relationships, increased sense of personal strength, changed priorities, and richer existential and personal life. And one of the things about post-traumatic growth, and I'm guessing a number of you have seen this literature, is that post-traumatic growth and pain are not mutually exclusive. A person can grow from the experience and still be experiencing a lot of pain from it. So, are there experiences that lead to wisdom? Growth is a process, not an event, ongoing. Might growth and wisdom accompany post-traumatic trauma or post-traumatic growth? One of my students in my class that I teach, wisdom gave a definition I like a lot. Wisdom is knowledge gained from experience applied skillfully to the way one lives. You know, that's pretty good. So, wise man, huh? So if you had experiences that led you to grow in wisdom, what were they? What did you learn? And were the experiences or lessons difficult and hard or smooth and easy? So have you had some experiences that led you to grow in wisdom? And would you be willing to share these? Because I know that some of these experiences can be very painful.
I don't see anybody.
Don't see anybody. Okay. Well, that's something we might.
Nope, we have Mark and Sandy.
Okay.
Well, I'll go. The death of a parent, dying young. My mother dying when she was in her 50s and I was in my 30s. That was something that, like I still deal with it to some effect, but it was something where I had to spend a lot of time deciding life's priorities and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. I'll continue on. So, the great thing about aging is that you don't lose all the other ages you've ever been. Lots of old people don't get wise, but you don't get wise unless you age. I'm not sure about that. By the way, there is some recent research on this one that does identify young people who have a lot of these qualities of wisdom. We require the opportunity to learn and practice the behaviors of wisdom. And there's abundant evidence that the presence of older people and access to their wisdom both improves lives and human life. So, finally, Waldo finds himself. Okay. Beautiful young people are accidents of nature, but beautiful old people are works of art. And with that, I will leave you. These are some of the citations, some of the papers. Wisdom of History. The one that I had mentioned before, and where am I here? Oh, it's the next page. The Cambridge Handbook of Wisdom, it makes some fascinating reading, as does Justy's book, Wiser, The Scientific Roots of Wisdom, Compassion, and What It Takes. And the SD Wise is, this is a link that you can click and take that test and see how you score. And they have different areas. And the Center for Practical Wisdom at the University of Chicago. They have a monthly newsletter that they put out that has links to different papers and articles and reviews of books and things. And if you're interested in this area, I would highly recommend it.
I put the link to the quiz in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, so people can just click on that and take it later. And is there anything else? I want to say thank you. I feel wiser and want to delve into this. I did want to add, you talked about morals and ethics, and our plus our wisdom literature, which is Proverbs and all of those things, we have midot, and midot are virtues. And my colleague in the religious school, Ashley Plotnick, has a midah of the month. And I think those things, and perhaps we should do that with our adults because it's so, so important. But before you leave, Amy, would you like to give us a little announcement?
I would. So I just want to let everyone know that this Friday at Shabbat services, Rabbi Ike will be honoring and blessing Diane and Michael. Close your ears, Diane and Michael. Diane and Michael Zidman, before they move to the next chapter of their lives, they're moving to North Carolina to be closer to their children. And I'm sure the Shabbat services will promise to be a very special moment. So I would encourage everyone to come if you can. It will be quite beautiful.
Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome, Diane.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Had to
and good
come on
luck
to
on
the-
your move
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
and the packing.
Yeah, getting a lot done.
I would be remiss if I did not tell you what's happening next week. It's I call it our own Ben Zeller, religious radicalism and the direction it has taken, which I'm going to just say straight up is the polar opposite of what we're doing today of wisdom. And in 2 weeks, our classes with both Rabbi Ike and Rabbi Evan will be starting up. Be sure to look at your Macomb at home. And Stan, you should look in the chat for all of the kudos you're getting.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. This has been fun. I have to say, and actually we'll probably share this with you if you ask her, but she's probably too polite to volunteer it. The idea of me talking to this group about wisdom, excuse me, y'all people were the ones that invented wisdom. What the heck are you doing listening to me?
We learned quite a bit from you, and we're wise enough to know it. I learned that today as well.
That's very kind, but it was like, oh Lord. And I was wishing that I have a friend, Rabbi Joe Ozarowski, and Rabbi Joe do what we call the Stan and Joe sessions, and we've done training for chaplains and people. What we're looking for, though, he's one of the people that I would regard as wise. My dad used to have an expression, he's another person I regard as wise. He'd say every time he opens his mouth, something sensible comes out. And I would say that's Rabbi Joe to a T.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll see you. We'll see you.
Thank you.
Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.